Good day, here are the top stories from the Pna Headlines. We begin with the government's continuous response to the escalating conflict in the Middle East. President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. assures the government is acting swiftly to ensure the safety and timely repatriation of all affected Filipinos. The president says the government is processing over 200 repatriation requests as Alert Level 3 or voluntary repatriation is enforced in Israel and Iran. Marcos said repatriated OFWs will receive comprehensive assistance, including financial aid worth 150,000 pesos, temporary accommodation, transportation, and livelihood support. Those who choose to stay home may avail of skills training, job matching, startup capital, and support for finding new opportunities. On the other hand, government agencies are providing food packs, financial help, and shelter to OFWs who have remained. Marcos urged affected Filipinos in areas to stay in contact with Philippine embassies and consulates in Tel Aviv and Tehran. Hostilities between Iran and Israel have entered the second week. Iran on Monday launched missile attacks at a U.S. air base in Qatar in retaliation to the United States airstrikes on its nuclear facilities over the weekend. Meanwhile, the first batch of OFW repatriates from the Middle East are safe and sound. In a statement, Department of Migrant Workers Secretary Hans Leo Gov't said embassy officials are assisting the group of 31 OFWs briefly stranded at Qatar's Doha Hamad International Airport following a brief closure of its airspace. Gov't later announced that they are now en route to Manila after the Qatari airspace finally reopened. The first batch of repatriates consists of 26 Filipinos coming from Israel, 3 from Jordan, 1 from Palestine, and 1 from Qatar. The DMW is also set to help 2 more OFWs who missed their connecting flights to Pagadian. U.S. President Donald Trump announces that Israel and Iran have agreed to a total ceasefire. In a post on Truth Social on Monday, Trump said Iran and Israel agreed to wind down hostilities and finally put an end to what he called a 12-day war. Neither of the two nations have announced that they have agreed to a ceasefire. However, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Tehran would halt its offensive if Israel stops its strikes. In a separate post on X, Araghchi thanks its armed forces for defending their country. Meanwhile, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned Iran's missile attacks on a U.S. military base in Qatar on Monday. A statement from the Secretary General's spokesperson's office said Guterres expressed deep alarm over the further escalation of the conflict in the Middle East. It reiterated his call for all member states to uphold their obligations under the UN Charter and international law. Iran launched missiles at the Al Udeid U.S. airbase in response to American strikes on nuclear facilities in Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. Guterres earlier condemned the U.S. military show of force. Vice President Sara on Monday asked the Senate to dismiss the verified impeachment case against her due to alleged violation of the one-year bar rule under the 1987 Constitution. A messenger from the law firm Fortun Narvasa and Salazar delivered the copies of her 35-page answer to ad cautelam, which means with caution, at the office of Senate Secretary Renato Bantug Jr., who also serves as clerk of court of the impeachment court. Based on the document, Duterte wants to dismiss the case and highlighting the fourth impeachment complaint because it violated the one-year bar rule under Section 3, Paragraph 5, Article 11 of the 1987 Constitution. The House of Representatives also received a copy of Duterte's answer as confirmed by spokesperson lawyer Princess Abante. There were 3 impeachment cases against the Vice President filed by different groups and endorsed by various lawmakers for betrayal of public trust due to alleged misuse of over 612 million pesos of confidential funds. However, these were not forwarded by the House Secretary General Reginald Velasco to the Office of the Speaker, a requirement for the complaints to be scheduled for deliberation by the House Committee on Justice. A fourth complaint was filed on February 5 and endorsed by over 200 lawmakers, more than the number of House members required for the complaint to be sent directly to the Senate for trial. The charges include culpable violation of the Constitution, graft and corruption, betrayal of public trust, and other high crimes. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, or PHIVOLCS, says Kanlaon volcano remains under alert level 3 due to intensified unrest. Based on the agency's latest bulletin, Kanlaon registered 3 earthquakes and 1,504 tons of sulfur dioxide flux per day, which started on June 23rd. It also released a plume of 900-meter-tall voluminous emissions drifting to southwest, northwest, and northeast. PHIVOLCS recommends the evacuation of residents living in the 6-kilometer radius from the volcano's summit. Meanwhile, the Office of the Civil Defense released a notice suspending farming and other essential activities to the 6-kilometer extended danger zone of Kanlaon volcano from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. starting today, June 24. And in our business news, oil firms implemented on Tuesday the first round of staggered price hikes on fuel products this week. Sea Oil, Shell, and Caltex hiked gasoline prices by 1 peso and 75 centavos per liter, diesel prices by 2 pesos and 60 per liter, and kerosene prices by 2 pesos and 40 centavos per liter. A second price hike with the same amount will be implemented on the 26th of June, Thursday. Clean Fuel also implemented today a 2 peso and 60 centavo per liter increase for diesel and a 1 peso and 75 centavo per liter hike for gasoline. The Department of Energy earlier announced that oil firms will implement staggered fuel price hikes on June 24 and June 26 to cushion the impact of higher prices on Filipino consumers. Meanwhile, the Department of Agriculture, or DA, guarantees eligible farmers and fishers will receive fuel assistance amid rising oil prices. In a media interview on Monday, Agriculture Secretary Francisco Laurel Jr. allayed the concerns of the agriculture industry about the possible impact of the Israel-Iran conflict.
Well, for this year naman, medyo okay tayo. Meron naman tayo din nasa budget natin na fuel subsidy, no, for fishermen. Malamang i-release din natin yun, ano?
The DA has allocated over 150 million pesos in fuel subsidy for both farmers and fishers under this year's national budget. Agriculture Assistant Secretary Arnel de Mesa says the farmers and the fisheries sector were given 75 million pesos each, which is subject to the issuance of certification from the Department of Energy. Aside from fuel assistance, Laurel said the potential effects of the conflicts on fertilizers may not be felt immediately. Laurel added that DA and President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. assured a stable supply of fertilizers in the country, which is projected to last until the end of the year.
We really have to monitor and we really have to be very creative. Ano? Pangako ko lang sa inyo, nakatutok ang presidente natin dito, nakatutok kami dito sa DA.
And those are the latest and the biggest stories from the Pna Headlines. For more news updates, visit our website pna.gov.ph or our Facebook and X account, Philippine News Agency. You may also watch the Pna Headlines through the Philippine News Agency's YouTube account and via the News and Information Bureau website under PNA News. I am William Theo. This is the Pna Headlines, bringing you stories that unite the nation.